Bienvenidos, señores y señores, to the Bleed Lows podcast. This episode of the Bleed Lows podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. Basketball is back, and BetOnline remains your number one source for all your sports betting needs this season. You'll always find the latest odds, team matchup info, player news, and game trends at BetOnline. And as your continued source for all your sports wagering information, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, and giveaways all season long. It's always the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and events, whether that's the NFL, NBA, NHL, MMA, tennis, boxing, or even golf. So head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 50% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use your promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts. And joining us on the Carne Asada this week is the Director of Communications for the Oklahoma City Dodgers, Alex Freedman. Alex, ¿cómo estás, amigo?
My Spanish isn't great, probably not as good as it should be, but I know what you're asking me. I'm doing great, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
So not only are you the Director of Communications, Alex, you're also a broadcaster for the OKC Dodgers, right?
That is correct, yes.
So you're a man who wears many hats. I want to get into that later on about the minor league life and how you don't have the same resources as the big leagues. But I want to start off with this, and that is, it seems like the big club has made a commitment to the young guys. So the young guys are guys that you got to see last year firsthand. And we're talking about Bobby Miller. We're talking about Gavin Stone, Miguel Vargas, Michael Bush, James Outman. What do you think? Do you think these guys are ready? I mean, we already saw Vargas go up there, but what about these other guys?
Well, when people ask me this question, one of my standard answers is there's only a way to find out if they're ready, and that's to let them play at the big league level. When certain guys have proved themselves to a certain extent in AAA, where there really is nothing else left to prove, that they can handle that level. Player development does not stop in the minor leagues. We hear the term player development and think it is synonymous with the minor leagues, but it's not. Player development continues in the major leagues as well. And of course, you're in a little bit of a different situation with the Dodgers than, say, you are with some of the teams near the bottom of the major leagues, where they can get those young guys to play and maybe not be as concerned about wins and losses. Well, the Dodgers contend year after year after year, so it is a fine balance that they have to strike. But I think if you're able to give them a chance to play, you do it early enough on in the season where, okay, maybe things don't go the way you hoped. You still have plenty of time to change course. So I know that's not really exactly an answer to your question, but a lot of those guys have shown that they're too good for the AAA level, and they're still going to get out at the AAA level. No one's going to put up Bonzian numbers at the AAA level or anything like that, but they need a chance to be tested at a higher level.
So I want to start with Miguel Vargas. So he got called up towards the end of the season, but there was projections that he was either going to be a third baseman, he was going to be a first baseman. Do you guys down in OKC kind of follow that same model that the Dodgers follow at the major league level, in the sense that they seem to really have a preference for players who can play multiple positions? So I think Miguel Vargas actually spent some time in the outfield last year, right? So defensively, what are you seeing from Miguel Vargas?
Well, I think just defensively as a whole, when you are a major league franchise like the Los Angeles Dodgers, where you have, at a lot of positions, I know things are maybe a little bit unclear right now in the free agency period, but under normal circumstances, you have guys that are entrenched at one position every single day. So the guys who are in the minor leagues need to develop that versatility because, say if it was the case of Ryan Noda, who just got taken by the Oakland A's. It's not a slight on Noda that he got taken. His problem was there was a guy named Freddie Freeman playing first base and is going to play first base up there for the Los Angeles Dodgers for a long time. And we've seen that for a lot of different players, whether it's going to be Mookie Betts, whether it's, the recent past, Trey Turner, Cody Bellinger, the only way to really kind of crack their way to be able to get to the big leagues is to play multiple positions so they can fill in here and there. Now, with to Vargas specifically, I felt that he got better defensively as the season went on at third base. Like you said, they started mixing in some left field, and they had the outfield coordinator, Jason Bourgeois, come to town to really start to work with them. And I had a really nice conversation at one point with Jason about Miguel Vargas's progress in left field. He says he's got the athleticism to do it. It's just, going through those scenarios every single, before every single pitch. What am I going to do here? What am I going to do there? Using BP time as his chance to really lock in and get a feel for what he needs to do in the outfield. I think that the baseball acumen, the arm is going to be there for him to be playable at the very least in the major leagues. But something else that you kind of asked about was, how are guys positioned defensively, in AAA, and a lot of it is coming from the front office, the major league front office and the player development staff, when they want to try certain guys at certain positions, or they'll tell our manager, Travis Barbary, hey, this guy needs to play at this possession or this position X days per week. So it could be something that, again, a promotion is imminent, or it could be just to try something different and see what somebody's got.
So I want to move on to Michael Busch. Michael Busch was a guy that we always had heard was a top prospect. It seemed at the beginning the projection was second base, but Michael Busch was also another guy who we saw play different positions last year, correct? Down in the minor leagues. How far do you see Busch's development? Is it just like what you had mentioned, he's just blocked, and that's why we didn't see him last year like we saw Vargas? Or is it just that Vargas was ahead of Busch in terms of progress?
Well, I think in terms of last year, the Dodgers the big league level had a very left-handed heavy hitting lineup. And you heard it throughout, whether it was Dave Roberts, Andrew Friedman say, we need a right-handed bat, specifically a right-handed hitting outfielder. Yes, they did get Trace Thompson as well, but Vargas, based on his handedness, kind of felt that. And I think that the pure hit tool for Vargas is ahead of Busch. Busch has more power, but the pure hit tool is there for Vargas. Now, in terms of Michael Busch and his offensive profile, he certainly had a pretty good season. It's going to be one of those, I don't want to say 3 true outcome types, but there's going to be a decent amount of strikeouts. There's going to be a good amount of walks, but there's going to be a good amount of power as well. I think the thing that really does not get talked enough about Michael Busch after watching him for basically an entire season is his athleticism. It really doesn't seem like you see that in the scouting reports from MLB Pipeline, Baseball America. That's something that really stood out to me, and why I think he has a chance to stay at second base. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays now under these new shift rules as well. But you have to consider that under the old shift rules, even though he was a second baseman, he had to play left to second base a lot of the time as well for certain right-handed pull hitters. And he would handle it just fine, or making that play out in shallow right field against the left-handed pull hitters. So I think his defensive versatility and his athleticism gets a little bit overlooked.
I want to ask you about James Outman because we had him on the show, and of course he had that great debut with the big club. But my biggest memory of Outman was when he got sent down and then he hit that ball into outer space. I think his first game back into the minor leagues. We asked him on the show. I was like, man, are you pissed? I mean, how do you cope with, you got a taste of the big show and now you get sent down? And it's not like you were sent down because of a performance issue. It was just a numbers game. Like, how realistic of a chance does James Outman have of seeing some more time next year, maybe longer time? And you see these guys every day. How do they react? How do they feel after getting a taste of the big leagues and then coming back down to reality?
Well, I think it depends on the situation. Whereas James Outman, it was probably knew from the outset it was temporary because of an injury. And, I think if you were to give him 2 options to go up for a week, do really well, go up to a week, not do really well, knowing you were going to go sent back down anyway, of course, you're going to take the option you're doing really well. That it's a confidence boost. And you reference that game in Salt Lake. Yeah, his first game in Salt Lake where he obliterated the ball. Unfortunately, he also fouled the ball off his foot later in that game and led to kind of a lingering injury that had him down for a couple of weeks after that. But in terms of this year moving forward, I mean, if the day we record this year in mid-December, you look at the way the roster is constructed, he's definitely going to get some chances and some ABs for sure. It definitely is in the outfield mix, to be, whether it's a fourth outfielder or a starter. That we know the organization is high on him. He has been, he was a tools over finished product guy when he was drafted. And, he got added to the 40-man roster, last year, in which, his numbers were good and they've just gotten better and better and better as he's gone on. But I'm not sure he would have been, for a lot of people, a slam dunk, 40-man ad last season. So obviously the organization is high on him, and for good reason. We talked about Michael Busch and his athleticism. Well, James Outman's athleticism doesn't get overlooked. Yeah, this guy is an athlete for sure, and good player. And like we said, he's deserves a lot of credit. He deflects a lot of credit to the Dodgers and the player development staff that's taken him from a really raw, unfinished product to now a major leaguer. And to answer your question just about how kind of guys take it in stride overall, I think most guys are aware of the business side and the numbers side, like you said, especially relief pitchers. We saw Justin Brule come down a number of times last year, and it's not because of lack of performance at the big league level. It's because they needed a fresh arm and they needed someone new in that bullpen. And he had options and others didn't. And that's sometimes what a lot of it comes down to, is who has options and who does not. I think it's a rare, you might see it once a year where a guy gets sent down that's really an eyebrow raiser. But there's a lot of things that we're not privy to as well.
Bobby Miller, we saw him very briefly in spring training last year, and of course everyone was getting excited. And I know he got moved to AAA towards the end of last season, and the ERA went up a little bit. Now, is that normal when we see pitchers changing levels? And what are you seeing in Bobby Miller?
Well, I think so, and especially when you're coming up to the PCL, which is notoriously a hitter-friendly league, and you're going to have to make starts in Albuquerque and El Paso and Las Vegas and Salt Lake and Reno and places like that. But Bobby Miller, I mean, he certainly looks the part, that's for sure. That's the way you want him to look as a major league starting pitcher and all that. And Bobby and Gavin Stone as well. When they did come to Oklahoma City, it was near the end, and they were on, some workload management and workload restrictions as well. But, he had a couple of really great performances. One was at home, I believe, in his second AAA start, 7 strong innings, an important game against El Paso, had 14 strikeouts in a game at Round Rock, including the final 8 straight, 14, only the third player in our team's history since moving into its current ballpark in 1998 with 14 or more strikeouts in a game. And I think the another reason why the numbers went up was because of those workload management. He wasn't on an every 5-day schedule, moving forward. And sometimes you understand why they're doing it for the player's health and long term, but for these players and pitchers who are so routine oriented, the kind of now going for every 5-6 days, you're going to start to being a little bit more sporadically. There's going to be some rust you have to shake off in between each start and things of that nature. So it'll be great to see him, whether it's with us, whether it's in the major leagues, like on a more set regular schedule, at the beginning of next season.
It's interesting that you bring that up because we have a theory here on the show that load management, so to speak, that the Dodgers are now famous for, I think might have cost Julio Urias the Cy Young Award this past year. But you brought up something that's very interesting that I didn't really think about. This fact that they're making him go maybe every 6th day as opposed to every 5th day. How much is that contributes to their lack of efficiency or being, a productive start for them?
I don't think anyone goes out to the mound, thinking, well, this is my only start in a week and I don't have to worry about being efficient. I think every starter, it's in their DNA to go as deep as possible. And we've seen plenty of times where a guy had a moderately low pitch count or innings and was very efficient and still came out of the game just because that was the plan set in place by the organization. And it is what it is. So I don't think that necessarily affects them in terms of that. I think, like you said, they're just so routine based. For us in the minor leagues, where they made the schedule changes a couple of years ago, where you're playing basically 1 6-game series every week, and then you have the day off on Monday. Well, a lot of the time that didn't mean that if you pitch Tuesday, you would also start on Sunday. Sometimes it didn't mean that as well, but a lot of times it did. So obviously there's not they don't feel there's a huge difference between, I think, having 4 days off or potentially 5 days off in between starts, and trying to shy away from maybe having one guy start twice. But I know there were, I think, the lower levels, when someone was on that Tuesday, Sunday schedule, there would be some limits on that Sunday start, but that's not something guys are thinking about just from being around them. And I know that there are times where, say, I remember specifically on multiple occasions for Ryan Pepio when he was with us this year, that the coaching staff knew he was on a very short pitch count. I mean, we're talking 1, 2, 3 innings, but they never told him, because of that. They don't want a guy to go out there and know, well, I have this amount. How are you going to maybe try and do too much in that compressed time frame? So you just let them try and attack it like a normal start. And when the time is up, the time is up.
You mentioned someone that I think everyone was surprised by last year, and that's Gavin Stone. I think the fact that he climbed up so quickly through the minor league system last year is what had everyone surprised. Is that more he just developed later, or is that more a tribute to the Dodgers development system that they were able to unlock something in this guy?
I think it's both, because, he's not a very big guy. He's about 6 foot, 6'1", and doesn't have a ton of muscle on him. So a chance for him to, to get another year stronger. His numbers were pretty good his first year as well. And, coming out of a smaller college program. And when we look back on the 2020 draft, he might end up, granted it was only 5 rounds, he might end up being one of the bigger steals of that draft, second to last pick of that entire draft. And I think, it's part of it from him getting stronger, the velocity going up, just continuing to refine his pitch mix, especially his changeup. His changeup has turned into a really good weapon as well. But there's something inside him, that sometimes you can't qualify. And one of the field coordinators required a quiet swagger. He's not, necessarily, when he strikes a guy out, going to pound his chest or anything like that. Hey, and I have nothing against that. I don't want it to seem like that. But he knows he's good. And I think he's gaining more confidence as well, especially when you start the year at high A, you go through double A, and in triple A, he had one bad inning is really all it boiled down to for him. It was one bad inning, and that happens. And it involved some defensive blunders behind it as well that just kind of spiraled out of control after that. But yeah, he was so impressive. Without a doubt, should have been the organization's minor league pitcher of the year. Really a lot of fun watching him, especially his last couple, starts of the season. He's definitely a fun one to watch. And, talking with scouts, they don't think, they say, you watch Miller and you watch Stone, you can watch them on back-to-back days, and it's a coin flip over which one you'd rather have.
Oh, wow. That's very encouraging news. Let me ask, there's a name that is, those guys that I just asked you about seem to be the ones on everybody's list that everybody's looking forward to seeing in spring training to see how they perform. But there's another guy that doesn't get looped into that group of guys. And it's a guy I'm curious about, and that's Jacob Amaya. Especially with the current shortstop situation on the big league club. What can you say about Jacob Amaya?
Well, for his first couple months with Oklahoma City, it was a struggle offensively. But He still was drawing walks. He still was, having long at bats. But as the season went on, we got into that final month of the season, there was more solid contact. There was, more of him, as he would say, just getting back to his game. I think the line he said to me was taking what was working in the cage and finally having it translate on the field as well. So the at-bat quality was still pretty good, even though, wasn't getting, hits and the contact night wasn't great, but it certainly did get better. So it maybe took him a little bit longer than some others to adjust to AAA. And hey, look, AAA is a hard level to play at. You're facing guys who have big league time for the first time. You're facing everyone else's, top prospects as they're getting ready to make their big league debut, or the guys we talked about earlier, where they're only in AAA just because they needed a spot at the big league level and they had options remaining. So AAA is really good level. I always feel that for fans who aren't really big hardcore baseball fans, that's kind of a big misnomer that, well, it's AAA. Obviously, it's not as good as the major leagues. I'm not saying that, but it is still a very hard level to play at and be successful at. I think in terms of, what you hear about Amaya is his defense as well. And, he's one of those players where I think sometimes the more difficult play can come easier than the routine play for him. And he's still a really young player. He signed out of high school and all that stuff. And he'll continue to get better. And I remember talking with one scout this year who really has watched him over the years and didn't even think he'd become the player he has now. So he's outseeded expectations, I think, from maybe some others in other organizations as well.
So you see these guys every day. Who do you think next year we will be talking about? Is there somebody on there that we haven't discussed yet that you think this is somebody we got to keep an eye on because he's going to make some noise?
I don't want to take a cop out, but I think we mostly covered it. I will give you a couple maybe off the radar guys that you could see in the big leagues at some point, one position player and one pitcher. I think from a position player side, Drew Avens, who, should he make the big leagues at any point in his career, he would become the third consecutive 33rd round pick of the Dodgers to make the big leagues. It was Zach McKinstry in 2016, Brett DeGuss in 2017, who got to the big leagues after he was taken to the Rule 5, and then Avens, if he is able to get to the big leagues. The best way I can compliment Drew Avens is a line from our manager Travis Barbary. We're a better team when he's on the field. We're a better team when he's in the lineup. He was the team's primary leadoff hitter, had a 50 game on base streak at one point. He doesn't have the eye-popping power. He's about as big as I am, maybe a little bit bigger, but he's a good runner, good defender, and especially now with some new rules of the major leagues where there is going to be more of an emphasis on speed in the game. He's someone I could see not playing every day, but I think now that all teams are required to have at least 4 position players on the bench with a universal DH, it's a lot easier to keep a guy on the roster and in the big leagues when they might only see the field a couple times per week. I mean, we saw that with Hanser Alberto this past season at the big league level. So Avens, I think, is someone who I would not be surprised if he got up and was on the major league roster. And the guys in the organization really like him as well. And then the pitching side, reliever who came to us for the final month of the season, Nick Robertson. Just basically fastball slider combo, does have a change up as well, but bigger guy, college draftee in 2019. He's a guy I thought could have gone in the major league phase of the Rule 5 draft this past year because he's kind of fits that more typical Rule 5 profile. Reliever with a good mix and that you can refine. So I think anyone else worth keeping an eye on moving forward in the next season.
I want to touch base on the fact that you wear multiple hats in the minor league. I mean, we hear all the struggles that players go through in the minor leagues, eating McDonald's or whatever, not having enough money to pay for rent, sleeping on couches. But on the other side, you guys also have to pick up a lot of slack. You guys don't have the resources that a big league club. How do you manage being the director of communications and then also calling play-by-play for all the games?
I like to tell people, look, I'm not a doctor or surgeon. Nobody's life is in my hands. I'm not solving the world problems, but it is a difficult job, and it is a job. It's a lot of fun. I love it. If I didn't, I'd be wasting a lot of my time. But it is a job, and I think for us that me, myself, and our department, it's myself, Lisa Johnson. I want to make sure I give a special shout out to her. I've been with the organization 10 years. She's been with us and working with me for 9 years now. And then we have someone who will work for us on a seasonal basis as well. So, we're overseeing all the daily baseball information communications, the game notes, the rosters, stats, lineups, all that stuff. In terms of social media and the website, if it's baseball related, it's going to come from our department. And then, like you said, the broadcasting as well, which again takes a lot of time and preparation every single day. So people ask me how I do it, and the best answer I have is you just do it. You just find a way to do it. And it is really weird in terms of kind of my life in general. You break down a calendar year where it's two very distinct 6 months periods of the year for me. But during the year, it's a lot of work, whether it's interview requests, check in with player development, check in with our coaching staff in terms of the roster movement and things like that, because ultimately it's our responsibility to send those in to the other teams and minor league baseball in our league and all that stuff. And then just a lot of stuff that gets thrown your way that keeps it fun, spices things up for sure. But like I said, you just kind of do it. And I'm sorry, that's not really a great answer. But I just don't know really any other way than to just get it done. And, sure, you sacrifice a few hours of sleep. I will tell you this, it's a lot easier now though than it was pre-2000, I guess 21, when they shifted to this different schedule, where that every Monday you have no game. Say there's a big difference between a day off and a day with no game, because a lot of time we're traveling on that day, and you're always looking to get ahead for the next day, because Tuesday, that first day of the series of the work week, if you will, that's always the busiest day. Tends to be the most roster movement that day. Either you're at home for the first time, you're at a different road location for the first time. There's always going to be the most stuff that you have to get done on Tuesday. So we try and get a lot done ahead of Tuesday on Monday. But yeah, that has just made such a huge difference as before, where you were playing 144 games in 152 days, which was just insanity. And I don't know how we did it as long as we did it in hindsight. So it's a little bit better now than it was in the past.
Something I want to touch bases with you that I feel is not getting enough attention and should get more attention is the labor talks with the minor leaguers. I feel for the first time, I mean, maybe ever, maybe minor leaguers are starting to get a little more. Rights is not the right word, but it seems like we're starting to give them a little more of what they deserve. What can you tell us about the labor talks with the minor leaguers?
I wish I could tell you more. I have the same curiosities that you do, so much in the fact that a couple weeks ago, I submitted a question to Ken Rosenthal's podcast on The Athletic about this exact thing. And he did address it, not very in depth, other that it's going on and it's happening, and people don't expect to have any big snags. I did hear from some folks also in our front office who were at the winter meetings recently. The general consensus is, again, that it's happening, that if there is going to be anything big negotiated, it would be for 2024, maybe not as much 2023. There also seems to be a pretty big understanding that, in theory, yes, the players could strike for 2023 at the beginning of the season, but there wouldn't be a lockout under any circumstances. It sounds like that, kind of you always heard leading up to the major league lockout when it expired. Well, they can just continue they don't have to strike or have a lockout. They can operate under the terms of the old agreement seems like if there is not an official codified agreement by time spring training, and people will start to report that there would be consensus for that. But I'm just as curious as you are and wish I knew more.
So I know, I guess it all depends on the organization, but there have been more organizations that have been working with housing, right, and getting housing paid for these players. I mean, to me, that seems like the least they could do, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. And it's just this, when you're someone who might be an organizational player where you're in high A 1 week. Okay, we need someone to fill in for a week or two at AAA, or especially when you get to AAA, when a lot of these guys, they have wives, they have kids, and it's just one less thing they have to worry about when they're trying to not only advance their career on the field, when they're trying to perform on the field, doing everything they need to do off the field in terms of pregame prep, working out, taking care of their bodies, having a quality place to sleep. Of course, we've seen so much more now made of sleep, as it should be, the kind of in sports in the world, and how important the issue is of resting and sleeping and recharging the body is. That you're not sleeping on an air mattress in a random apartment with 5 other guys or anything like that, that you do have a reliable place to rest your head at the end of the day. And like I said, playing baseball, pro baseball, is hard enough as it is. It's very competitive, obviously. It's something where you have to prove your worth basically every single day. So if there's one less thing that you have to worry about off the field, it's a big win.
Well, what we do here, Alex, on the Bleed Lows podcast, we like to refer to ourselves as the Carne Asada because we just like to hang out and chat with our guests. So this is a segment called our kickback questions. So I have some quick questions for you. First of all, you are from St. Louis, is that correct?
That is correct.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Did you grow up as a Cardinals fan? And are you old enough to remember the 1985 NLCS?
Yes, I did grow up a Cardinals fan. No, I am not old enough to remember the 1985 NLCS, but my dad is also a huge Cardinals fan, and he was actually at the game where Ozzie Smith hit the famous home run.
So let me ask you this. Does your dad ever give you grief for working for the Oklahoma City Dodgers?
Not at all. I'm very fortunate to have some very supportive parents, and Cubs organization might be a little bit different, but no, I think you're a big baseball fan. You and the rest of your crew and the listeners are obviously big baseball fans. But the average person, they ask me if I'm still a Cardinals fan, and I tell them no. They're like shocked. It's just when you have this kind of job, obviously you're a fan of who you work for. You're also a fan of people, more so than teams, because you're able to make a lot of relationships along the way, and the diaspora will eventually spread itself out across the industry and things like that. So, and now, especially that when the reformation of the different leagues, we had a couple of years ago, and we don't play Memphis, so we don't play a Cardinals team anymore. I don't even have a pulse as to really what's going on in that organization on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you for sparing my feelings and saying the Ozzie Smith home run and not the Jack Clark home run. I'm still working on the therapy on that.
Well, that is I feel one of the classic moments, though, is seeing Pedro Guerrero just slam his glove down.
Why did you go there, Alex? So let me ask you this. I got another one for you. You seem to have a very eclectic taste in music. How do you become a fan of yacht rock and then 80s, 90s hip hop and R&B? How do you mix those two genres?
Well, the second category is just really that was a reflection of the time of my youth growing up and in the environment I grew up in and stuff like that. Yacht rock, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of songs that you hear from time to time that you just kind of heard over the years and all that. And sometimes you just want some more chill kind of music and things like that. So So I enjoy, the Sirius XM Yacht Rock station, although I wish they had a little bit more variety on it. But I think that's also just kind of one of those fun things I like to throw in there as well.
Are you for public yachts?
I've never even thought about that or really even heard that question before. So I really don't even know how to answer. Where I live right now, I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of lakes here close by in Oklahoma, but I don't know if you'd be able to take a yacht, rent a yacht anyway.
Very well. So were you inspired by any, being a broadcaster, were you inspired by any particular broadcaster?
This wasn't a job that I necessarily thought about when I was growing up. I went to school, I think, with the thought of becoming a sports or news, TV or newspaper reporter. But after taking some of those more traditional journalism classes in college, figured it probably wasn't the best fit for me and was doing this kind of stuff really just as a hobby for fun on the side. And kind of that's how I kind of found my way into doing it professionally. It was always one of those things where I guess I thought that, hey, it'd be a cool job, but I didn't even know, like, how do you even do that to begin with? I had no idea. And eventually I found out, but that's because of that. I just never really gave it much thought when I was a young kid or anything like that. So in terms of influences, I don't know if I necessarily had any influences. Of course, just growing up, like we were talking about earlier, there was always a baseball game, it seemed, on TV or on the radio, growing up. So I think just being around the game and having an appreciation for some of those guys, there's not necessarily one person I kind of point to from growing up. There's a lot of people that I admire now, for sure. But I don't think there was anyone where it's like, oh, I want to be the next so-and-so.
Okay. So we're going to end the show the way we always end the show. And we are about the Dodgers here on the podcast. We're also about LA, but we're also about taco culture. We end the show with this question. Before I end it, real quick, though, I do want to ask you, what is the absolute worst minor league town that you had to stay in?
Some would argue it's for the team I used to work for, the High Desert Mavericks out there in Victorville, California. That was my first job out of school. I didn't know any better because, like I said, it was my first job. I'll put it this way. I don't want to completely drag anyone through the mud, but the place I am glad that we no longer visit and play games at that we had for several years when I started here in Oklahoma City is Colorado Springs. I'll leave it at that.
So what was it about that town? Is it there's just nothing to eat there? Is it just the weather?
Well, the ballpark was built in, I think, the mid or late 1980s and was not touched after that.
Okay.
The high altitude, which led to high scoring games, and the facility there. The ballpark really wasn't close to the hotel. It just was not a pleasant place to go, and a place I don't want to say I dreaded going to. Oh, and the fact that the travel's not easy either. You have to fly into Denver and then bus another hour or so plus to Colorado Springs and all that stuff. Again, I don't really shed many tears that we no longer have to play games there.
Thank you for that perspective. So here we go. Final question. We're about taco culture. So here, I don't know how many trips. I mean, you were in Victorville. I don't know how many trips you made to LA, but we want to know, what is your favorite taco and where do you go to get that taco? I mean, can you get good tacos down in Oklahoma City?
You can. Oklahoma City, at least as of a few years ago, 6th fastest growing Hispanic Latino population in the U.S. South side of the city is predominantly Hispanic as well. So yeah, there are definitely some spots you can go get some good tacos. I'm not a picky eater. I will eat just about anything. So I like the kind of tacos, and you're gonna have to help this gringo out from getting to the word I want to get to. but the kind of tacos where the meat is really like braised or stewed for a long time,
Birria?
stuff like that. So yeah, like birria is one of them, or if it's just like a slow roasted green chili pork, stuff
Oh,
like
okay.
that,
All right.
or slow roasted carnitas or something, barbacoa, stuff like that.
Oh,
Those are
wow.
the things that I tend to lean towards. And when I'm out on the West Coast, definitely try and get my fill of fish tacos too. So yeah, I'm easy to please. I like all tacos. A couple of spots that I like going to around here. One is called Los Cabales, which again, like I said, their green chili pork verde is phenomenal. And then there's a place where I don't know if I want to call it a little bit more Americanized, but it's called Big Truck Tacos. But they've got a good variety of stuff as well.
Look, Alex, I want to give you credit. So we're not going to call you a gringo. You are no longer a gringo now.
Okay.
You're one of our carnales because let me tell you, you pulled barbacoa out.
Yeah.
All the guests that we have on the show, I could probably list in one hand how many people have mentioned barbacoa. And that's talking about Latino guests, right? And for you to pull the barbacoa card, very impressive, carnal. Very impressive.
Well, I might impress you further. One of I don't want to say dreams, but one of the things I would love to do is eat barbacoa the way that, it was traditionally prepared, where it's cooked in the ground and all that
Yeah.
stuff. So I'd love to do all that. Yeah, I consider myself, I don't consider myself a foodie. I just consider myself someone who likes really good food. And like I said, I'm not picky and love just trying all sorts of different food. And especially if we're in different places, whatever the local specialties are and kind of the local landmarks and stuff like that. And on the topic of carne asada, I want to make sure that I mention one thing. James Outman, the carne asada shirt you gave to him, he would wear it on the field, like during BP and stuff, quite frequently. So I wanted to make sure that you knew that.
Oh, that is awesome. Thank you. We did not know that, but thank you
Yeah.
very much. So there you have it, folks. When you guys go down to Oklahoma City to watch an Oklahoma City Dodgers, go say hi to our carnal, Alex Freedman. He is now a homie. He is a friend of the carne asada. So, and hey, if you can, get him some barbacoa tacos. Bring him some barbacoa, down in Oklahoma City. Alex, we want to thank you. We really appreciate all the knowledge that you dropped on us. I know with the Dodgers' lack of moves over here, everybody's panicking. But it seems like if these young guys pan out, the Dodgers are going to be pretty much covered, for the foreseeable future.
There's that, but I think this front office also deserves the benefit of the doubt. For those who are panicking, just remember who's in charge. They didn't forget how to do their job all of a sudden.
So you sense that panic then, huh, Alex? All the way out, even in Oklahoma City, you're getting that panic?
I think when fans see it's not just the top tier guys, but some of the maybe more mid-level guys who aren't signing with the Dodgers, that's when it seems like that you can feel the social media panic start to come over a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Once again, Alex, where can our fans follow you, our listeners follow you on the social media?
Sure. On Twitter, which is where I'm probably the most active, more so during the baseball season than the off season, but at AZ Freedman, AZFreedman. On my Instagram as well. I don't post a ton, and when I do, it is usually just ballparks and stuff like that. So if you're curious about that sort of stuff, my username over there is Freedman's Voice. And then we'll plug our regular website, OKCDodgers.com, but also myself and Lisa, who I referenced earlier. We write more feature-type stories. And our secondary website, which is called Beyond the Bricks, is a nod to our home at Chickasaw Bricktown Ballpark. And that's medium.com/Beyond the Bricks.
Real quick, before I let you go, how often are you confused for the other Freedman?
It's funny that you say that. It doesn't happen too often, but it's funny, like when I might tweet something out and someone just goes on a rant about the front office that has nothing to do with what I just tweeted. And I said, you're looking for the other A Freedman, not this A Freedman. And I think there are some times where it's funny. One of the players told me this year. Like I said, Andrew spells his last name slightly different than I do.
Yeah.
But we have, like a team WhatsApp group chat that, that's for logistics and stuff like that. And, since I help out a little bit with the travel when we're on the road and whatnot, that's usually when I'll put something in there. And he said there's sometimes he does a double take when he sees my name come up and all that stuff.
There we go. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. A big thank you to Alex Freedman for joining us.
No, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And once again, a big thank you to Alex Freedman, the communications director and broadcaster for the Oklahoma City Dodgers, or OKC Dodgers. So, Babyface, do you feel better now that we basically got a mini scouting report from Alex on the guys that we might have a chance of? I mean, for sure, we're going to see Vargas next year, but those other guys, what do you think? Do you feel better?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see some of those guys, come up and see what the talks have been, because these are some of those guys that we've heard, for a couple of years now that, when it comes to trade talks, these are the guys that like, no, we're not trading that guy. We're not trading that guy. We're waiting on them to see what they could do. Kind of like same thing we had, a few years back when you hear stuff like Seager and Bellinger and Will Smith, those talks, those guys, nope, we're going to bring them up and see what they do. So now I think it's time for these guys, Bobby Miller, Vargas, Outman, Michael Busch, see what they're going to do and see how they're going to pan out. We got to, they, like you said, there's only one way to know, right? They got to come up and they got to play. So right now, when I think it's the way things are going, I think it's the best, perfect time to do it. So, excited to see what they're gonna bring this year.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify for those listening, why didn't we bring up Diego Cartaya? Diego Cartaya has not been in AAA. We only focused on the guys that were in AAA because Alex had seen these guys play. There was a couple of takeaways from that thing that I thought was really interesting. And the number one, and I think it's a good thing to remember, and that is if we give these guys playing time from the beginning of the season on, towards the middle of the season or even a month or two in, if it's not panning out for these guys, if these guys aren't working out, if they're struggling, they just might become trade candidates. And I can't stress this enough. I know everyone is losing their mind right now because the Dodgers don't seem to be making big moves. It looks like maybe the Dodgers' big moves might be made at the trade deadline in season. And so I agree. Let's give these guys a chance. It seems like, as he referenced many times, these guys are only in AAA because there's no room for them in the major leagues. Well, the Dodgers now made room for these guys in the major leagues. So now I'm curious to see, how does Vargas, it looks like Vargas is the leading candidate to get the most time. But I'm curious to see if they give Outman time, if they give Michael Busch time. The other thing that I thought was really surprising to hear from him was to say that Gavin Stone might be at the same level as Bobby Miller. Now, I know we started hearing a lot about Gavin Stone last year, but it always seemed like Bobby Miller's going to be the stud, Bobby Miller, Bobby Miller, Bobby Miller. For him to say that a scout told him that, take your pick, either Gavin Stone or Bobby Miller, that might be a good problem to have. Do you remember, Babyface, back in the day where it was going to be Kershaw and, oh my God, Billingsley? That Kershaw and Billingsley were going to be the mainstays of the roster, right? Maybe now, and I know everybody likes to use this comparison, Koufax and Drysdale. Could Gavin Stone and Bobby Miller turn into those guys? Could those guys, I mean, down the line, if these guys develop to be what we think they're going to be, that Dodger pitching staff is going to be, I mean, yeah, Kershaw will probably be gone, but you're going to talk about, hopefully, Julio Urias, Walker Buehler, Bobby Miller, Dustin May, and Gavin Stone. I mean, the future's looking right, but that's if these guys pan out. If these guys don't pan out, oh yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. The other thing he said is make sure we give Andrew Freedman the benefit of the doubt, that we need to give this front office the benefit of the doubt. Look, Dodger fans, I don't know how good Dodger fans are going to be about giving the benefit of the doubt. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, it seems like Jacob Amaya isn't close. Did you get that same vibe?
Yeah, it sounds like his defense is there, but he's got to work on the offense. And like you mentioned, AAA probably isn't the easiest league to actually go out and hit and be a 300 hitter or whatever, because you are facing guys that are rehabbing from other teams. You are facing the guys that are on the cusp of getting to the show. So it is probably a lot harder to get adjusted to that. I mean, but it is the stuff he is going to be seeing if he moves to the next level. So I think we'll see where he's at this year. I mean, I don't know if he might get an invite to big league camp. Maybe Dodgers take a look at him. On the big league side. So we'll see. A lot of stuff's going to get answered. In the next month or so as we start getting closer to spring training. One thing real quick on Gavin Stone, he was up with the team at the end of the season, when they had the week off and they were going through the inter squad games and stuff. Gavin Stone was up and he was actually pitching. So, that shows kind of what the Dodgers are thinking of him, that, he might be right there. He's ready to take that next step as well.
It's very exciting. I mean, I feel a little better after talking to him, but I mean, there is still a huge question mark. I mean, is this going to translate? I mean, we've seen, I always use, for Dodger fans who are old enough to remember, Billy Ashley. Billy Ashley was supposed to be the next best thing, and it didn't happen. But real quick, to cover just some recent Dodger news, what are your thoughts on the signing of Noah Syndergaard? Now that we have Thor, do you feel better about our starting pitching?
Yeah, I mean, when I initially thought, okay, Noah Syndergaard, right? We knew who Syndergaard was, 5-6 years ago, right? He was just this power pitcher, just like throwing 102 miles an hour, right? And then he got hurt, so he was out a year. He had Tommy John. So last year was his first year coming back. And usually that first year is still kind of slow for a pitcher. So we'll see how going into this year, he looks. But it looks like he's kind of gotten away from just being that hard thrower. Kind of going more with the sinker, slider, kind of that deal. And the Phillies actually, when he got traded to the Phillies, they didn't use him as much in the playoffs. It didn't seem like, right? I don't remember them even using him in the World Series, did they? I don't know if they used him in the World Series.
Remember that. No.
So that kind of surprised me. I was kind of wondering where he was at, during those games. But I mean, if it's one thing that the Dodgers do, right, is kind of resurrect careers and kind of put these guys on the right path. And I think that's probably something he saw. He saw like, hey, Tyler Anderson got a 3-year deal pitching one season in LA. Andrew Heaney got a 2-year deal pitching one season in LA. And Andrew Heaney was hurt, right? And Andrew Heaney wasn't like extraordinary, like, top of the line. I mean, he had his problems with the home runs, but he had a good strikeout. He was striking out a lot of guys, right? So he pitched fairly well when he did pitch. So I think Syndergaard seeing that, and he said, hey, you know what? If I go to LA, I get with what these guys are telling me to do, I'm going to probably be able to sign, a longer contract at the end of this year. So I think he's trying to prove himself as well. He's betting on himself. So it's going to be good. Hopefully, and with Pryor, we can see a totally different Syndergaard this season.
I would not be surprised if this scenario played out where Syndergaard ends up winning 15 games, having a season similar to what Tyler Anderson had. But my concern is we are like gluing and pasting, taping this pitching staff together. My concern is what happens once we get to the postseason. And that's why I feel like the trade deadline is going to be huge for the Dodgers. So I get why Dodger fan is upset about this, especially when you see other teams are loading up. But look, the trade deadline, we might be thanking Freedman at the trade deadline that he didn't make crazy signings, and then he makes deals that will put the Dodgers over the top, because I think last year was a good reminder of we need to be playing well towards the end of the season. So if the Dodgers get hot at the end of the season, that might be better for us. Real quick before I end the show, I want to get your thoughts on the Carlos Correa contract to the hated ones. I got to tell you this right now. 13 years to me seems absolutely ridiculous. And if the Dodgers are losing these guys because of the length of years, makes me a little nervous about, how much Ohtani's going to want, not in terms of money, but in terms of years. I'm glad the Dodgers. I mean, you already have it with Mookie Betts, but I'm glad the Dodgers are not. I mean, that should look. The money's not the issue. The issue is going to be he's going to be taking up a roster spot at the end of that contract, and then you're going to have these situations. What do you think about Correa's deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think we mentioned this a couple of episodes back. I mean, if there was a place for Correa to go, right? I mean, definitely landed in San Francisco, the right place for the Dodgers to continue to hate on this guy. Now they're going to do it for 13 years, right? I mean, yeah, to me, the length of those contracts, 13 years that he got, Bogart's got 11 in San Diego. These guys are going into their 40s, right? Yeah. And I know they get it. I mean, I'm sure the teams get it, right? These guys will probably have, maybe 4 or 5 years where they're still pretty good, and then maybe 2-3 years where they're kind of going on the decline, and they know at the end of that they're just going to have to eat up those last couple years, because they're going to probably not be as good or maybe even playing. But I mean, that's kind of the danger, right? Too, because like we're talking with this Dylan, like you don't want a lot of those contracts on your books. Like you're going to have 38, 39-year-old Bogarts, and then you might have Padres might have Bogarts and even Machado re-ups. You're going to have these guys at the end of their career, and you're paying $70 million in a couple 3 players like that. So that in the long term, right, is dangerous. We'll see how that pans out, but we'll see. I mean, just I'm glad the Dodgers stayed away from contracts like that. But like I said, it's going to be tough if guys are looking for. I want 10 years. I want 11 years. Yeah. It's gonna be tough to get some of those big names to LA.
And again, that's why I think these minor league guys it's really important that these guys succeed. I'm rooting for them. I hope these guys pan off, because if it doesn't, in order to get like superstars, I think it's going to be hard, because they're all going to want, 10 years plus deals. And look, we've already seen it before. We saw the Pujols deals. Those deals don't age well. And for me, it's about taking up roster spots. You don't want someone taking up a roster spot where we could get someone else that could help the team. So that being said, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Once again, make sure you guys are subscribed to the podcast. Tell your friends about the podcast. Tell them to subscribe to the Bleed Lows podcast. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can see all our past episodes. You can see our beautiful, lovely faces. Subscribe. Yo ha sido su servidor, Juan Ramírez, de parte de mi colega Babyface. Nos vemos para la próxima. This episode has been brought to you by Bet Online, where the game starts. Adios.